Hello everyone, Lightshore Storm here, and today we're going to be discussing what if Nick survived. This is the final season and we're going to be wrapping everything up with a big final episode. Surprisingly, the final season actually ends up changing quite a bit, so strap yourselves in and get ready. If you haven't already seen the first two parts, make sure you do so using the link in the description and comment section. But with that out of the way, let's go ahead and discuss the final season. Before we get to the first episode, we have to address Clementine and Nick's trip to McCarroll Ranch. They arrive on a horse, losing it to the ongoing battle. After moving ahead, they're shot at by a soldier, which grazes Nick. Clementine moves ahead to strike, but she hears a woman yelling to stop. She looks over to see Bonnie, who recognizes Clementine and tells the man to stand down. Nick approaches after Clem tells him that they're safe and notices Bonnie as well. The two are surprised to see each other after all this time, but Eddie reminds Bonnie that they're still in a war zone. So the four head to the nursery where they meet the caretaker who gives them AJ and allows them to carry on in a nearby car. We then have a time skip taking us to the events of episode 1 of the final season. An older AJ is now a little less on edge than in canon due to having Bonnie, Eddie, and Nick as extra people to defend him over the years. One important thing to note is that I think Bonnie and Eddie would have become very close, as Eddie is a super chill dude and both of them have experienced issues of drug abuse in their chapters of 400 Days. I think that would give them some things in common that they can share and connect further with, making them closer to each other than to Nick or Clem. Not a lot really changes in the beginning of the episode, as the train station would still have a trap in store for our group, causing them to be flooded by walkers. But due to there being a bigger group now, getting everyone into the car would be a lot more difficult, leading to Eddie being bitten on the arm before making it inside. But the car would crash after walkers surround them and start breaking in, which leads to Clem and AJ being incapacitated. Bonnie and Eddie get out of the car, with Nick trying to call for Clem as she slips in and out of consciousness. Luckily for our group, two teenagers named Violet and Marlon save them and help them escape. Clementine wakes up as I think having more people to slam into in the car instead of the car itself would be a lot easier to handle for her. She awakens in the woods to a heated argument between Nick and Bonnie and Marlon and Violet. Eddie is quietly freaking out about his bite as Marlon makes a rough introduction to Clementine. She asks what's going on, and Nick says that they have to cut off Eddie's arm to keep him alive. However, Violet chimes in that it'll only draw walkers. Marlon and Violet refuse to let this group come back with them if they're going to draw the dead, and Marlon insists they wait and let their doctor handle it. It'll be much safer that way. Bonnie objects, says it might be too late by then, and they can't risk Eddie dying. Clementine is forced to make a decision between these two options. The first is to agree with Marlon and Violet, whether it's for the purpose of not attracting walkers, wanting to make it to shelter, keeping the unconscious AJ safe, or you think Eddie being treated by a doctor will be more likely to make him survive. Or maybe you just really don't like Eddie and you think he will die if you wait. Bonnie will try to disagree, but Clementine insists that if they want Eddie to live, they need to get there faster. This will also be the default if Clementine stays silent, since walkers would eventually show up and force them to move. This choice is going to cause a major split, so let's start with the path where you agree to take Eddie to the school. And we'll be on this one for a while, so just keep that in mind. We'll come back to the other choice in a bit. Marlon and Violet guide Clementine and the others through the forest, clearing walkers along the way. They make it there, with Marlon asking Willie to open the gate quickly. Once inside, Marlon tells Violet to find Ruby and she does so, while he leads our group to a spot they can set Eddie down on. Marlon then leaves to handle something, and Ruby arrives shortly after. Eddie needs to have his arm cut off, but Ruby doesn't like the thought of all the blood. Bonnie questions if she's actually a doctor, and Ruby scoffs at that proposition, stating that she learned some things from her teacher and that's it. Clementine and the others learn, through this, that Marlon lied about there being a doctor, and they're obviously upset about that. But time is fleeting, and if they want to save Eddie, they've got to work fast. So Clementine takes AJ out of the room to go talk to Marlon, while Nick and Bonnie help Ruby with the procedure. Clementine confronts Marlon about his lie, with AJ being vocal about it too, since Eddie might not survive due to how long they took getting there. Marlon gives a sincere apology, but promises Ruby's hands are good ones, and that their friend had a higher chance of making it here than out there. He then offers the possibility of staying at the school, regardless of how things turn out with Eddie. Clem and AJ then proceed to meet everyone else, with Nick giving them an update later on. It looks like Eddie's gonna make it, but Bonnie is staying with him, and Ruby is keeping tabs. She seems super shaken up about the procedure though. Asim and the others return from their trip, and Clem, AJ, and Nick help them get inside. After this, Clementine and Nick join a game of cards to help the others learn about them. They go to bed after checking up on Bonnie and Eddie, with Nick trying to get Bonnie to rest. Clementine can motivate Bonnie to sleep, or give in to her request to stay with Eddie. Clem also gets to apologize to Ruby for the scene, and that she shouldn't have been put in that position, but Ruby understands and doesn't blame them. Marlon was the one who lied about her being a doctor. As Clem, you can back her anger at Marlon, or make it known that he was just trying to help everyone by getting them there. The next day, Marlon enlists Clementine, Nick, and AJ to help with hunting and fishing. Nick would take the opposite of whatever task Clem chooses, making a comment about the first fishing trip he and Clementine went on. While Clem's interaction with the characters would remain the same, Nick would likely respect the sim and his desire to think about the best future for the group. On the fishing trip, he'd also try to get Violet and Brody to work together, but probably fail in the end. He is a bit closer to Brody in this interaction though. I also see Lewis and Brody respectively sharing their apologies and hopes for Eddie's survival to either Clem or Nick. Nothing else really changes aside from that, leading to the same train station confrontation. I don't think Nick would be quick to act against Abel, since he's learned from his recklessness across 2 whole seasons by this point. I feel like he's grown too much for something like that to happen this late. So the group makes it back, revealing their new supplies. Bonnie is a bit concerned that going outside the safe zone may jeopardize their position in the group, since Eddie is not at all ready to be traveling. But he isn't dead, so he will likely end up surviving once he's healed. This means they can all sleep in the same room now, though Clem and AJ or Bonnie and Eddie might have to share a bed, or there might be an extra room for them to split into. At night, a tired Nick hears strange sounds in the pipes and goes to investigate. He makes his way outside, opening the door to the basement and finding Marlon and Brody talking. He listens for a short while before approaching the two to confront them. It's here that Brody is about to reveal some secrets, but Marlon reminds her that Nick is an adult and they don't trust adults anymore. This causes her to reluctantly be quiet, with Nick refusing to leave until he hears the truth. Now, this is around the time Clementine would show up after hearing all the voices. Due to Clem's prodding, Brody caves, telling them about Marlon's deal with another group. This leads to Marlon hitting Brody, which quickly kills her. Marlon is forced to flee the scene, trapping Clementine and Nick in the basement. Brody quickly turns into a walker and attacks the two, but they're able to make it out safely after taking care of it. On the surface, they find Marlon telling everyone a made-up story, and Clem and Nick clear up the lies. AJ and Bonnie are also present as well. The truth about Sophie, Minnie, and Brody are revealed to everyone, and Clementine gets the option to appeal to Lewis, Violet, or Ruby due to her being more involved here. However, Marlon is still shot by AJ, causing everyone to lose it. This includes Nick, Bonnie, and Clementine, as they realize what this means for their place here. The four are sent back to the room, where Bonnie is furious at AJ for what he's done, since it means Eddie will have to travel while he's not doing great. At the same time, Nick sees himself in AJ and hates that, so he tries to make sure the boy sees the wrong he did. As Clementine, you can decide to agree or disagree with his assessment, but Nick obviously has had a decent amount of callbacks to when he acted rashly, and it caused problems. AJ, feeling pressured from all 3 people, is going to be very flustered and confused. Sadly, the kids still vote the group out, with Lewis and Violet escorting them. Eddie is upset but hides it pretty well and assures Bonnie that he'll be fine. After the group is left by Lewis and Violet, they get held up at gunpoint by the 2 soldiers named Lily and Abel. Lily reintroduces herself to Clementine and offers her and her friends a way to join their group. She lists off their various benefits and points out that Clementine clearly knows why it's good to stay in a group since there are 5 of them. But even with that many people, they're still being stopped by just her and Abel. Their group likely isn't strong enough to survive long out here. While it seems like everyone is vehemently against Lily's offer, Bonnie seems to be curious, even though her proposition involves getting the entire school group taken by Lily and her people. Lewis and Violet help get them out of there, either by firing on Lily or being a distraction. Nick is hit by a shot from Abel as he's defending AJ from harm. The group escapes with the help of some walkers as a distraction before being approached by a stray walker. But it's actually a man wearing a skin mask who guides them to safety. This is James, who helps deal with Nick's injury as the group reels from what just happened. A big discussion about Bonnie wanting to accept Lily's proposal comes in. She appeals to the fact that Clementine knew her in the past and that they haven't had somewhere to stay in so long. This group just cast them out. Why on earth should they risk death to protect them from the Delta? Eddie is kind of grossed out by this since he was so adamant about not wanting kids to be taken in a war when you see him in the ranch flashback. Also, the dude that threatened them totally reminds him of someone who got him and his old best friend Wyatt separated, and that gives him a bad feeling. Bonnie knew Wyatt, so that would be a fun fact, but she still holds her opinion. Nick is against it though, since he doesn't want another Carver situation to happen. But since Bonnie was involved in the operation itself, she isn't as tipped off at the possible issues. James gives his opinion, since he was part of a group called the Whisperers that brainwashed people young and old and used them to do awful things. But after stating his backstory, he backs off from the arguing. In the morning, Clem, Nick, Bonnie, Eddie, and AJ head back to the school, with James leaving after they arrive. Alright, now this is where we're going to pause this route since it's kind of a connecting point to the other one. Let's go back to the decision in episode 1 of cutting off Eddie's arm or going with Marlon and Violet, and go for the former this time. Clementine denies going anywhere until they know Eddie's bite won't be an issue anymore, so Marlon and Violet are forced to leave them behind. The group finds a safe enough area with a rock they can rest Eddie's arm on. Nick uses some of his shirt as a tourniquet and covers Eddie's mouth while AJ and Bonnie hold off the nearby walkers. Clementine then cuts off Eddie's arm, causing him to scream and bite Nick's hand before passing out. Clem, Nick, and Eddie are now covered in blood, and both Nick and Bonnie have to work on carrying Eddie while Clem and AJ fight their way through the woods. After narrowly escaping all of their deaths, our group rests for the night, cauterizing Eddie's stump, and probably Nick's messed up hand too. Bonnie thanks Clem for backing her up, but Nick is kind of doubting their odds of survival now, especially Eddie's. There's a brief argument over whether they should have gone with Marlon and had the doctor do the procedure, but it ends quickly as they decide upon what to do now. I think their best bet would be checking out the train station again since it had lots of food, but since Eddie is in no condition to travel, someone has to stay with him, with Bonnie obviously volunteering. So Clem, Nick, and AJ head to the train station the next night, running into Abel, and the same situation happens there that I talked about previously. Although Nick would be the one doing the bell thing, since it's just the three of them. The group escapes, taking the supplies back to Bonnie and Eddie, the latter of which is not looking too hot. But this food should be able to get him moving a little bit, even if he shouldn't be. They can't afford to stay exposed in one area for too long. The next day, the group is traveling when they hear a commotion nearby. They peek through some trees to find the guy from the station with a woman, and they're talking to Marlon and a girl with red hair. Obviously, this is Marlon and Brody and Lily and Abel, so I'll refer to them by name. Lily informs Marlon that she needs all of them now, with both him and Brody being shocked at this. Marlon exclaims that that wasn't their deal, but Abel tells him to get over it. Lily assures him that his friends will live a better life there, or at the very least, they'll die fighting a just cause. Hearing this, Brody begins panicking, and Abel groans at how weak she is. Lily tells Marlon to go back to the school and tell everyone that it's time to go. She's sure they're finding less and less resources around this place anyway. It'll be better for them. Marlon is forced to agree to this, with Brody telling them that this isn't right. They can't just take everyone and make them fight a war. Abel tells her to shut her mouth before she calls the dead, but Brody refuses to relent. Lily raises her gun, telling Marlon to get her in line or she'll be forced to. And since none of our group possesses guns, aside from AJ, Clementine can choose to tell him to shoot or not. If she tells him not to, then Marlon consoles Brody briefly before taking her back to the school. Lily and Abel follow them after a while, lurking nearby to a surprise attack if they have to. This causes them to run into our guys, with the chase ensuing. In the path where you have AJ shoot, he'd hit Lily in a spot that isn't fatal, and Lily and Abel chase them down sooner as Marlon and Brody run off to the school. Either way, since Eddie is in a much worse condition in this version of events, I've gotta say that he'd lag behind, leading to him being killed by Abel's shotgun blast. This also serves as a fair trade, since now Brody and Marlon are alive in this path, and Eddie is alive in the other. Plus, I think it'd be a really cool switch up, since Eddie seems to have survived in both versions, only to be ripped away when you no longer expect him to die. It gives your choice some stakes, while still keeping him around for some time. Obviously, our group is upset by Eddie bleeding out, and Bonnie wants to run back to get him, but Nick grabs her, causing him to be hit with the blast from Abel as well. Though it's not fatal this time, and they're able to escape with the help of the guy in the walker mask. Once they arrive at a safe location, Bonnie cries uncontrollably as she's lost yet another person close to her. James understands her loss and tries giving condolences, but they feel cold since he's not very socially adept. Sadly, they can't stay with him since he's just not ready to be near other people again. And Marlon's group looks like it needs help. The next day, Clementine and AJ go back to the spot Marlon met up with Lily and Abel at. They meet Marlon and Brody once again, with no sign of Lily. Clem and AJ reintroduce themselves to Marlon and tell them that they heard their little dispute. If you had AJ shoot Lily, he'd reveal that he saved them. Marlon isn't too sure though, as now his people are scared. They know these guys are supposed to come take them, but now that they've seen others in the area, they're probably going to be harsher. Brody freaks out yet again, but directs her fear to Clementine for getting involved. Marlon genuinely doesn't know what to do here, as his only option is to somehow convince everyone to give in, but AJ suggests that they fight. As Clementine, you can only really agree, since Lily and Abel have now taken Eddie from your group. Marlon does apologize for the loss of their friend, stating that he tried to help them get through that issue safely. It does come off wrong though, so he backs off. Marlon notices that if they escape that attack and they're not in a community, they must know how to take care of themselves. His group has never really left their comfort zone, and their help might genuinely be what saves everyone's lives. So he asks Clementine for her help, causing her to lead them back to their group. They grab Nick and Bonnie, with James quickly leaving upon hearing more people arriving. Marlon and Brody then lead Clem, Nick, Bonnie, and AJ back to the school. Marlon does warn them that his group won't be too fond of adults being around again, and especially not if they're supposed to be training them or telling them what to do. But they'll just have to live with it. It's the only way they will live. Our group does bring their bags of food from the train station, so the blow of their arrival is softened a bit, as the kids haven't really had much to eat as of late. Clem can interact with all of them like she does in episode 1 of the original, but a lot of the kids show disapproval or question the validity of their help. They play the game of cards to help them learn more about each other, with Bonnie sitting out since she's not in the best mental state after Eddie's death. During the game, Lewis asks Marlon how exactly they found out about the evil guys coming to nab them, and Marlon would avoid the question. The next morning, Clementine helps Mitch and Ruby inside the greenhouse, while Nick starts to learn how to use a bow, causing more discussion about how these guys are meant to train them. Clem makes a good name for herself, with Bonnie finally returning to the fold on the warpath to avenge Eddie. Brody gets stressed out a lot, leading to a similar scene where Clem hears her and Marlon through the pipes. She goes to the basement, finding out the truth about Minnie and Sophie, and that he was planning on offering Clem's group to save his. This causes Marlon to lash out and hit Brody before running away and trapping Clementine after Brody dies. Luckily, Clem survives the encounter with her walker, finding everyone questioning Marlon. Clementine shows up, revealing the truth, causing everyone to turn on Marlon quickly. They've known Clem and her group for longer than in the canon scene, so Marlon trying to invalidate Clementine's words isn't as credible. From here, Clem chooses Marlon's fate, but the kids don't really agree on letting her have the decision. Since AJ is less unhinged here, I don't think he'd kill Marlon, so that's a plus. Marlon is imprisoned, and the group goes over everything in the morning. Sadly, it does seem like Marlon will be needed to help fight, despite Violet and some of the others being upset at him. They chose to work with Clem and her group to survive, so unlikely allies aren't exactly off the table. Marlon promises to right his wrongs, and Clem can choose whether to be more caring and understanding or brutally honest with him. But both are definitely motivating. Alright, so remember before where I said that we reached a connecting point? Now we're finally there. As you can see, both versions lead to Clem and her group training the kids and preparing for the war. In the first path, Eddie is alive and Bonnie is a little worried about the battles and might be considering the Delta. In the other, Eddie is dead, but Marlon is alive and Bonnie wants revenge on Lily. I'd like to imagine Eddie befriending Willie and Ten since he seems like he'd be a cool uncle type of guy. I'll probably call these the Eddie and Marlon paths respectively, just to keep things simple. So for instance, Clementine can still romance Lewis or Violet, though if you have Eddie, she can also hang out with Ruby. This isn't because of Eddie, but it's because Clementine had more time to interact with Ruby in the Eddie path, leading to more chemistry between the two. I imagine Ruby's hangout would be something related to her southern aesthetic, or some way to calm the mind she might have learned from Miss Martin. Though if Clem tries to progress things in a more than friendly way, Ruby will politely turn her down, revealing that she might have feelings for someone else. Clem can guess a few different people, one of them being a sim. If she guesses a sim, Ruby will ask how she knew before admitting it. Though if Ruby slapped a sim earlier in the episode, she'll reveal that she only did that because she's not good at stuff like that. She doesn't know what she really feels yet. Clementine can try to encourage her or warn her to be careful. But anyway, after the hangout, Omar is shot in the leg with an arrow and Lily arrives with the cavalry. In the Marlon path, Bonnie would defend Clementine from Lily's insults. If this Lee person is responsible for who Clem is now, then he did just fine. Lily goads Ten into coming quietly and our split occurs again. It will either be Eddie or Marlon telling him not to believe Lily. If it's Eddie, Bonnie will quietly tell something to Mitch and Willie. As Eddie is getting through to Ten, Bonnie raises her head and offers Lily a chance to end it here. She'll go willingly, and Ten can see his sister, but nobody else. Here you can see Mitch get visibly angry and signal willing to move. Eddie tells her to stop, asking what she's doing, but Lily likes where this is going. The group already has some conflict, she just has to tease out a good chunk of them. However, in both scenarios, the bomb made by Mitch and Willie goes off and Mitch charges Lily. He's killed by her knife and Lily immediately calls for an attack. But sadly, since Marlon/Eddie, Nick, and a possibly enraged Bonnie are there too, the fight will go a bit easier. I'd love to see Marlon save Clem from Abel, showing his dedication to undoing his mistakes. Bonnie and Eddie are separated in the other path, with Eddie helping Clementine fight Abel. When the two go down, Bonnie attacks Lily to get her away from Clem. But in the Eddie path, Bonnie agrees to go with Lily, much to Eddie's discomfort. In the Marlon path, Lily just gets Bonnie off of her. Lewis/Violet are about to be captured, but Clem and Nick are able to save both. This means only Omar, a sim, and possibly Bonnie were taken, although Bonnie was willingly. The next day, Abel is interrogated by Clementine, and I think Eddie would be present if you have him. He'd need to know where Bonnie is, and we could really see a ruthless side of Eddie we've never seen before. After learning the location of the Delta ship, Clem seeks out James, gaining his help with the herd. The party happens with Eddie telling the story of how he lost Violet, vowing to never leave Bonnie behind. Or in the Marlon path, Bonnie vows to get revenge and won't stand for a corrupt regime hanging over her head again. And Marlon is apologetic about the situation and how he failed his group when they looked to him for leadership. but he is trying to be better, and he'll prove to all of them that he is still looking out for them. In both paths, Nick shares his many past mistakes, hoping that he can set a good example so no one there makes the same ones he did. I would also love for him to reference Gabe. I think that would be a cool way to tie in a new frontier. The attack on the ship begins just with Nick handling the bomb and Marlon/Eddie backing Clementine up. Marlon wants to be on the front lines to feel like he's the first to go if they fail, and Eddie obviously wants to find Bonnie and get her out. In the Marlon path, Bonnie is told to stay behind and lead the kids to help escape after the bomb goes off. Unfortunately, Minerva captures Clementine and Marlon/Eddie, and she's pretty angry about Marlon forcing her to live this life. Clem and her duo wake up in a cell, but they're with Bonnie in the Eddie path. Eddie and Bonnie are relieved to see each other, but that isn't the important thing right now. What's important is their differing views of the situation. Bonnie thinks they should stop fighting and just go with Lily. They're already this far in. Eddie is sad to see that she truly believes this and wants her to come back with him. Lily shows up, telling the parable of the twins, which isn't taken well by Eddie or Marlon. Eddie sees the kind of brainwashing that will be done to Bonnie, and Marlon knows he's partially responsible for what happened to Sophie. Lily takes Marlon/Eddie to the top of the ship in hopes of getting them to flip sides. She also takes AJ after realizing he might be a good soldier. No hand chopping occurs since Lewis and Violet are both outside. Clem is eventually able to escape, but she has to fight Minerva. And in the Eddie path, Bonnie too. Very similar to how you kinda have to fight Violet too if she is the one captured. Luckily, Nick shows up and takes out Dorian before aiming Minnie's crossbow at Bonnie. He then tells Asim and Omar to leave, and for Clementine to head up. I think Nick facing off with Bonnie here is really a way to get Bonnie to see the wrongdoings of her actions, and also it's hard for Nick because him and Bonnie are pretty close. Upon Clementine's arrival at the top of the ship, she sees Ten and James, who were captured. Also there is Bonnie in the Marlon path. So in the Eddie path, events just play out the same way with the Ten situation. But because Bonnie is here in the Marlon path, I think Lily would be more careful, having her gun ready. She orders James before Ten steals the gun from one of her soldiers. As Ten struggles to hold it up, Lily taunts him, but when he doesn't do anything, she punishes him for it by shooting Bonnie. This causes Marlon and AJ to attack her just like Eddie and AJ would when she tries to shoot Ten in the other path. Clem then teams up with Marlon/Eddie to take down Lily, and AJ ends up with the gun. Now, another path diversion is caused. Because AJ killing Marlon led to Nick, Bonnie, and possibly Clementine being upset, I think the Eddie path would see AJ shooting Lily as Clementine's choice like in canon. But in the Marlon path, because AJ never gets any backlash since he never killed Marlon, and Ten basically just got Bonnie killed, I think he would pull the trigger regardless of Clem's choice. He has to take the decision upon himself, much like he wanted to after sparing Lily got James killed in canon. The boiler room explosion goes off, leading to everyone rushing off the ship. In the Eddie path, he finds Bonnie with burns on her eyes, comforting and leading her to the rest of the group. Minerva attacks, but Clementine is able to handle and escape her. She then leaves with AJ, Ten, and Nick. They enter the cave, meeting James and Marlon. Or just James. Or no one. It depends on whether Lily died and what path you picked. If James is there, he'd be upset about AJ killing Lily, with Clem and Nick both having to talk AJ out of his new moralistic worldview. Though that part happens anyway. James then tries to take AJ and attack Clem, but Nick defends them. He then either leaves or stays behind to fight the dead, depending on what Clementine says. AJ is also given Clementine's trust to make the hard calls or not. The group goes ahead, meeting Lewis/Violet, and traveling across the bridge. This is where Minerva shows up, leading an army of the undead. Clem and Nick fight off Minnie, meaning Clem doesn't really get the bad axe cut. She'd likely still get a small cut by the axe though, along with Nick as well. Luckily, if Marlon is there, Ten will reject Minnie's offer to come with her, since he's been shown enough care to see she's been corrupted in more ways than one. However, I think Marlon would be shot at the last second by Minerva, ultimately giving her the revenge she wanted. Alternatively, AJ will shoot Ten or not if you don't have Marlon. So that means Lewis, Violet, and Ten are all determinant. The group then splits up, with Ten/Lewis/Violet, or both if you add Marlon, going over the fence. Nick, Clementine, and AJ escape the herd, climbing a rocky hillside. But I do think that since there are 3 of them trying to escape instead of 2, there would still be a bite, even without Clem's severe injury. And I imagine Nick would force Clementine to go first, leading to him being the one who's bitten on the leg. They make it to James's barn, cutting off Nick's leg after fighting all the walkers together. They then head back to the school, where they finally enjoy their peace. Bonnie and Eddie likely begin rekindling their love, with Bonnie apologizing for losing her way. Or in the Marlon path, Marlon, Eddie, and Bonnie are all dead, but 10, Lewis, and Violet are all alive no matter what. So both endings have a really big list of pros and cons. And that is going to be the end of What If Nick Survived. It really became a big one with long branching paths that span changes across the entire 4th season. Bonnie and Eddie were fun to include, and Nick was obviously interesting to further explore in 11 extra episodes total. Nick in particular didn't really have too much to do this season, but I feel like he was there enough to make it matter. Instead, the main focus was kind of just on Eddie and Bonnie, and that can be shown in both routes, with Marlon also taking up a sizable chunk as well of one route. And I think the endings having either all of the Determinate School people surviving, or having Bonnie and Eddie surviving, kind of just shows that you can have the best of both worlds, with our old group being important and also our new group being important too. And Nick's sacrifice at the end, getting bitten for Clem, is kind of a way to make him like reintroduced as important at the end. But yeah, that has been What If Nick Survived. I really enjoyed writing this entire series, and I hope you guys liked it too. As always, a huge shout out to our members, LA to Plug 2, Davisville84, Willie, Aiden Kearns, Zombie Warlord, yeah, Tifu A, and Chief Strato Constituent. But as always, tell me if you liked this series, comment your requests for future videos, and subscribe. Thank you for watching. Have a great day.